Good afternoon. This is Shannon Kringen, Goddess Kringen, Seattle. I'll try to look straight into the camera. I just want to do a raw video about the grief of losing my cat. So this is, I guess, going to go on my YouTube channel. Maybe I'll put it on other social media websites. I'm not sure. But if you are uncomfortable listening to somebody talk about the loss of a pet, grief, loss, death, dying, and of course, an airplane is going by just as I'm recording this to interfere with the noise. So I'm going to try to just not let that bother me. So I'm going to talk about the recent loss of my cat, Keesoon. He was a beautiful orange fluffy cat. I think he was 15 or 16. I adopted him as an adult, and I was going to talk about grief and loss. I had a cat Tux many years ago and a cat Stella, and my latest cat was Keesoon. And I still haven't buried him yet. He passed away a few days ago. I have him in a freezer, wrapped up in a very safe, hygienic way, keeping him frozen because he is dead, and he is, in a freezer because I am waiting to bury him either in my mom's yard out in the country with, I think, 5 other cats that are buried there. Or a really close friend of mine said I could bury my kitty in his backyard near some flowers in the corner of his cute yard. So that would be, both of those are very nice places to bury my kitty, Keesoon. I love him so much. I miss him so much. I recently was pet sitting for somebody who has a dog and a cat who live together in their backyard. And I already did lots and lots of crying about Keesoon. And let's just say that my whole life I've had pets, mostly cats. I've also had dogs in my family. As a kid, my grandmother had dogs and cats and horses and geese for a while. And in junior high, I had a goat, and she gave birth to a baby goat. So I actually had 2 goats, and I had some dogs but mostly cats. My mom and I and my dad, actually, my parents divorced when I was a kid, but each of them had cats separately. So I've been through the loss and the death of many, many pets. I've had a cat run over by a car. I witnessed a cat dying because of a car. I don't want to talk about it. I was only 10 years old. It was horrible. And it was something that I tried to save the cat from that fate, and I could not. I told somebody to stop. They were backing up, and that was the end of that cat. So it was really disturbing. I was only 10 years old. That was Knickerbocker, my kitty. Then there was Jasper, who got hit by a car. And then there was Kaiser, who jumped out of our car, I think, when my mom and I were driving from San Diego all the way up to Whidbey Island, and we were on our way to Petaluma. And I think that Kaiser somehow got out of our car, and we never saw Kaiser again. I don't know what happened to Kaiser. He disappeared. Maybe somebody adopted him, who knows? But I think he jumped out of the car when the window was rolled down too much or something. Then there was Bogey and Bacall and Caddy and Jazz and Brandy and Short Stuff and Grendel. And I want to talk about when a cat or dog becomes elderly and they start having chronic health conditions like their kidney fails or their liver fails, and then you take them to the vet and you try to see if the vet can help save them or prolong their life. And then you have to weigh and you have to measure, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for my cat? Like, am I doing this for my cat to enjoy their life, or am I doing this because I'm a human that just wants to be a hero trying to save my cat, even though the cat is miserable and we're keeping them alive artificially? So that's the concern that I have. So let me just start with my most recent 3 cats, because I've had many, many cats throughout my life. But in the last 20 years, I've had 3 cats. And instead of adopting a kitten, which might be the best thing for me, because then the cat would hopefully live till age 20. So if I adopted like a 1-year-old cat, I could have it for potentially 19 years. But instead, I guess I feel kind of sorry for adult cats who are up for adoption and nobody wants them. People just want kittens because kittens live longer and kittens are cuter or whatever it is. So I adopted Tux as a 9-year-old. And he was just such a sweet, affectionate cat. And they told me nobody wants him. He's such a sweet cat. If nobody adopts him, one of us is going to take him home because he's just a great cat. And we want someone to take him home. So I adopted him. And the previous records showed that somebody tried to adopt him. Somebody gave him to the animal shelter, and somebody gave him back after 2 weeks, and said he's too demanding. He needs too much attention. I can't deal with it. And I thought, okay, that's the cat for me, because I love cats that are extremely affectionate and follow you around and sort of will walk with you like a dog. I've had several cats that I could walk around the block like they were a dog. They would follow me and stay with me and not run away. And they love attention, and they're very clingy in a good way, in my opinion. Because the stereotype about cats is they're very aloof, and they just want you to feed them and then leave them alone. They don't really care. They're not super affectionate. But I've had many cats that are very affectionate and love attention and will follow you around and go for walks with you and hang out in the yard with you, just like a dog. And it's really fun, except I like cats sometimes better than dogs because they're quiet. I'm more of a quiet, introverted person, and I like to go away off and on. And cats are a little bit more independent than dogs. Dogs, you have to walk 2 or 3 times a day, and you really need someone to take care of them if you go on any kind of trip. Whereas a cat, you can usually have a friend check on them once or twice a day, and they're probably going to be okay. Although every time I would go on a trip, I would worry about my cat no matter what, even if I had somebody checking on them every day. So I adopted Tux in 2007, and I think no, oh my god, no, Tux passed away in 2007. Sorry, I ruined the story. I adopted Tux, oh my gosh, in 1996, and I had him until 2011. So 2007. That was 11 years. Sorry, I'm a little tired. Keesoon passed away on Monday, and it's now Friday, August 8th, which is Lionsgate. In astrological terms, Lionsgate is apparently a very rare planetary occurrence, happened on August 8th, 2022. And that's the day that I chose to help my cat transition and pass away because he no longer could eat or drink, and he was severely dehydrated. But let's go back to Tux. Okay, Tux is a cat that I had for 11 years. And things were going really well for many years. And then by the time, I think he was about 21 years old, by the time his health started failing, or about 20, and he started having different problems. And then one day he was getting kind of thin, and he had cataracts, and, his eyes were getting cloudy, which happens to older pets usually, and older people. And so I took him to the vet, and to make a long story short, we tried a few things. Then they said maybe he had a blockage. His kidneys were starting to fail or not work very well. And he was still like eating and drinking and using his litter box. And then one day he was constipated, and they said, and I got an ultrasound, and they said he had a mass in his abdomen, and they didn't know. They physically felt him and didn't feel anything. It was small, but they didn't know what it was, and unless they did surgery, and then that would be really expensive, and he might not survive the surgery because he's older and a little bit frail. So I decided not to give him surgery. I didn't want him to pass away during surgery. I thought, nope, I want to keep him home with me and try to see if he still enjoys life. So what I did was I kept him home with me and I babied him and I nursed him and they gave me some things to try to feed him, to help his appetite, to help him. They gave me oral things I could feed into his mouth to help maybe stimulate his appetite because he wasn't eating very much. He was still drinking. So to make a long story short, as soon as he stopped eating and then he stopped drinking, and he did something, he was purring, like he still seemed to love being alive, and I petted him and he would sit near me and cuddle with me and he was purring, but then eventually he acted as if he wasn't. I think he was uncomfortable, probably in pain. He had something, a mass in his abdomen area, and they didn't know what that was, and I wasn't going to take him for surgery. And he was already about 20 or 21 years old at that point, very older cat, like, 100-year-old person. And he was still affectionate, but as soon as he lost interest in eating, and then he was not drinking very much, he would go to his litter box and he wouldn't be able to do anything in his litter box, and he looked uncomfortable. And then one morning he got up and he went into my closet and he put his chin on my chair in a strange way. Like I had a folding chair that had this metal bar underneath it. And he sat in a way that looked so strange. And he kind of just put his chin, he kind of just laid his chin on this metal bar. And he just kind of looked at me kind of like, huh. I felt like he was saying, I'm done. I'm done. And he didn't seem to be enjoying his life anymore. So I called the vet and talked it over with the vet. And we decided that we would make an appointment to help end his life, give him a tranquilizer and then, euthanize him. And I felt nauseous thinking about it. So I thought about it and then I decided and I made the appointment. And to make a long story short, my dad and I went. And if you don't like these kinds of topics, please don't watch this video. I'm not going to say anything disrespectful or gross or anything, but I'm going to talk about the reality of euthanizing a pet and saying goodbye to a pet. With Tux, on the phone, they told me they would give him a tranquilizer, a sedative, and then I could hold him in my lap and he would basically be in a deep sleep, but still alive. And I could pet him and hold him and he would be very relaxed and not feel any pain. And he would just be in a deep sleep. And then when I was ready, they would have to shave some fur off his arm and inject him with basically an overdose of anesthesia, which makes the cat's heart stop. And then, they pass away and their brain is no longer like functioning, they're flatline in terms of being alive. They're passing away because of the anesthesia. So on the phone, that's what they said to me. So that's what I was prepared for. And when I went to the vet, unfortunately, the lady that did this with Tux and me did not get that message. And she did the fast food method, which I didn't know existed. She just immediately shaved his arm and injected him with a lethal dose. And then she said, "Oh, his heart stopped. We're done. Have a nice day." It was like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, fast food. Like that was horrible, the way she handled it. On one level, I admire that medical vet people can help somebody say goodbye to their pet without crying and getting overly emotional and really freaked out about the sadness of it all. That's good. But she was so extremely unemotional and she didn't explain to me what she was doing before she did it. So I was completely shocked. And my last memory of Tux, because what I wanted was for them to give him a sedative, me to hold him, kiss him, say goodbye, and say, "It's okay, Tux. It's okay, Tux. We're going to help you pass away now because your body is failing." And then they would give him the thing that would make his heart actually stop. But they didn't do it that way. They just immediately, Tux growled at the vet. I had to help. The vet and I both held Tux because he was scared and didn't like it there. I don't know why my camera keeps jerking. I hope it's okay. So my last memory of Tux was him looking at the vet and going growling. And he was a very nice, sweet cat. So for him to growl at the vet meant he was very upset because he wouldn't usually growl at me at all. So for him to growl at the vet proved that he was extremely upset. He knew something icky was happening and he didn't like it. And he was like, "Argh." And then he immediately stopped, almost like he was a light bulb that had been pulled out of the wall, because that's basically what happened. His heart was just stopped from this drug that they gave him, this anesthesia or whatever it was, the high dose of anesthesia that they use for surgery. But if you use too much of it, the heart stops in the cat. So his heart just suddenly stopped and he couldn't growl. And he growled and it was very artificially stopped. And it felt horrible mentally and physically. It was shocking. It was awful. And I complained to the vet later. I wrote them a letter and I said, and they said, and they told me they were sorry and they didn't know that that person was going to do that method. I didn't even know there was the mean method. I would call that the harsh method. I don't like that. And the gentle method, which is to sedate an animal and let the person hold the animal. So the animal themselves is more gently taken to the end of their life. Because part of me actually would prefer to let an animal have a natural death and not do artificially keep them alive with drugs and surgery and weird methods that might not be comfortable for the animal and might not be pleasant for the animal, I think is kind of cruel. So I had mixed feelings about euthanizing Tux in the first place. So that was awful. So I thought, okay, never again will I euthanize a cat because that is terrible, unless I can make sure that they're going to do it in the gentle way that I think is more gentle for the animal and for me, for the pet, because it matters. The cat is the main thing. The cat is the main priority, and the human can also take care of themselves. And the human deserves to have a gentle, peaceful experience also, if possible, as long as the emphasis is on the pet, because it was about Tux, not about me. But I wanted to have an okay experience as well and not have a really awful, stressful experience, even though it was extremely sad. So what happened was they did that with Tux. He was gone. The lady took her stethoscope out and said, okay, his heart stopped. He's officially passed away. Bye. Sorry for your loss. Goodbye. And it was just really cold and I didn't like it. And that was awful. So I complained and they said, we're really sorry. And they sent me a card and all this kind of stuff. But I never went back there again. There was a certain vet clinic that isn't even open anymore. Thankfully, I'd never want to go there again. But then I adopted Stella. I tried to not have a cat for a while and I started being lonely and missing. And then I adopted Stella. I found Stella. I thought, I'm still grieving Tux. I'm not ready to adopt. But I kept thinking about Stella. And then I went on a trip. I went to Florida for a holiday and the lady said, nobody's adopting Stella. Please take Stella. Please take Stella. Please take Stella. Nobody wants her. We don't want to we don't want to drop her off at the shelter. We want some nice person to adopt her. So I said, okay, fine. So I adopted Stella, even though I was still grieving Tux. I adopted Stella. I fell in love with Stella. Stella was really cute. Tux, let me just say Tux was Tux Lux Curling Tail Egyptian Musk. He had this like curly cute tail. And I had him from 1996 to 2007. And I loved Tux so much. And he followed me everywhere. And he would take walks with me. We'd walk around the block together and he would stay with me. I also let him out on his own and he would always come home. So Tux had a good life. And I treated him really well. And I had him for 11 years. And then he became ill. And then I had him euthanized. But I regret how that happened. Okay, then I adopted Stella. And then I thought, okay, when Stella gets old and has health problems, I'm gonna help her have a natural death, or I'm gonna do something gentle for her. I'm not gonna let the vet do mean things to her. So I'm gonna just be gentle with her and I'll figure it out when it happens. Well, what happened with Stella was, for some reason, I adopted her. I don't remember what age she was. I think she was only 7 when I adopted her. And then 7 years after I adopted her, things were going well. Stella was really sassy and she wasn't as affectionate as Tux. She was a gray and white. Tux was mostly black with a little bit of a white chest, like a tuxedo, chest, and they had a curly Q tail that he was born with, like an unusual little curly Q tail instead of a regular tail. So Tux Lux Curling Tail Egyptian Musk. He was really fun and I loved him so much. May he rest in peace. Okay, then Stella. Stella was gray and white. and she was very sassy, and she had kind of a, I'm Stella, Tux didn't meow very often. He kind of reminded me of Clint Eastwood, like he was kind of quiet, and he would only speak, if it was important. And he was kind of a very dignified gentleman, cat, very handsome and dignified. And Stella was kind of like, I'm Stella, look at me. And she was a little bit like snooty and a little bit not super affectionate. She would sit next, she didn't like to sit on my lap as much as, and if I picked her up, she didn't always like that, but she liked if I pick her up and then I put her like on a tree branch, or I put her in her kitty perch in the window, and she would look at birds. And she loved it if I helped her up and down off of things, and then I let her be free and roam around. And she would like to climb in the closet and sleep in like strange, funny places. Like she would, instead of having a certain hangout, she would, sleep in all different kinds of places and sleep next to me in the bed. But she wouldn't like sit on my lap a whole lot, but she would like sort of sit next to me and lean next to me, and loved for me to pet her. But she would sit next to me, and she kind of walked like Marilyn Monroe. She kind of would sway her hips, and then she would look, and then she would run. I would go in the grass out in the yard, and I'd go, Stella, Stella, and she would run towards me, and then she would kind of look at me and kind of spaz out and jump around. And she would jump on a top of a rock. I used to live in a place where they had this big grass, a bunch of grass, and then this rock. And she would jump up on the rock and look at me. And then she would like lift her one paw up. I swear she would kind of walk like Marilyn Monroe and kind of sway her hips. And then she would turn to the side and look at you and go like, I'm Stella, look at me. It was funny. Okay. So she was really cute. I don't remember when it started, but she started acting really lethargic, and then she started lying down a lot, and then she seemed to lose her appetite. She was still drinking, but not eating very much. And I could tell she didn't feel good, and something was wrong. So I went and had her tested at the vet, and they said she has her kidneys are kind of getting not so great, but her liver is starting to fail. And they said, usually if cats' livers start to fail, that means they've been exposed to a toxin. Have you, and I was very careful with Stella, except she used to go outside sometimes. So now I'm afraid, I still don't know what happened. Basically her liver failed. Stella's liver was starting to fail, and nobody knows why. She was apparently exposed to something, like it could have been antifreeze or rat poison or some weird pesticide. I don't know, and human chemical. Part of me is worried that I used a flea remedy that harmed her, a flea remedy that I sprinkled, this powder that I sprinkled in my house, that I think it was borax, but I might have used the wrong kind. And part of me is afraid that I did that. So I don't know. It could be that her liver failed because of a mistake that I made with trying to get rid of her fleas in a way that didn't work. So her liver was starting to fail. And so, to make a long story short, what I did with Tux was I kept him at home with me, and I didn't do a bunch of medical intervention to try to save him. I fed him really healthy food, gave him lots of attention, and gave him love and affection. And then at the end had him euthanized, except it was done in a bad way that I don't agree with. Okay. With Stella, I thought, okay, I'm going to really try to save Stella. And they told me if her liver's failing, it's probably not going to work. But they gave me hope. This other lady said, my cat had liver failure and we brought her back. So I had Stella stay overnight in the vet, which was really stressful to Stella. She didn't like it. I remember the look on her face when I left her at the vet, and I regret that to this day. I will never do that again. I remember dropping her off. She was purring a little bit. She was pretty lethargic, but she ate a little bit of fish. I gave her a little bit of raw fish. And then the last good memory I have of Stella was her climbing on this tree stump branch that she liked. And she climbed on it, looked at me and purred a little bit. And she was kind of being playful. And that was the last good memory I have of Stella. And then I took her to the vet later that day. And I just remember them carrying her back, and she turned and looked at me like, why are you doing this to me? I mean, I swear she had this look on her face like, what's going on? What is this? Like she knew this was not going to be a fun thing. So I left her there overnight, and they did this kind of like fluid I don't know what it was called, but they did this intense thing where they try to rejuvenate the cat when their liver is failing, and they cleanse something. They try to flush the toxins out of the cat and help its liver clean, because liver clears toxins, I guess, in your body or something. So they tried to do for her what the liver was supposed to do that her liver couldn't do, and it failed. She was worse. The next day I came there to check on her, and she was really weak, and I felt like this is the end. She's not going to make it. Maybe I should have said goodbye to her right then and there. I don't know. But what I did was I took her home with me, and they taught me how to give her fluids because she was very dehydrated and couldn't eat or drink anymore. And they said there's really only so much you can do with giving her fluids. I feel like maybe they should have just recommended that I say goodbye to her at that point because she was miserable. So basically, I let them train me, but I didn't want to do what I did with Tux and give up on her. So they gave me all these IV bags, and at home every 48 hours I had to inject her with fluid, and they told me it would be easier every time. Well, no, it wasn't. It was harder. Every single time she was more upset with me, and it was awful, and I regret it. I regret leaving her overnight in the vet. Because that just was too much for her. It was too stressful. It would have been better if I just kept her home with me and gave her hospice care at home in a gentle way. So, and then had somebody come and help me say goodbye to her if she was clearly suffering a lot and not enjoying her life at all. So what happened with her was then I kept giving her IV fluid injections, and it seemed like it made her physically, hydrate, but she just looked miserable, and she was just lying there and couldn't really do anything. She wasn't really going outside in the grass. I put her in her little carrier and took her out into the grass, but she didn't really seem like she cared much that she was outside. And she used to love the grass, and she didn't care that much. She kind of looked at me like, well, I don't feel good, so it doesn't really matter to me if we're out in the grass. So I got the feeling that she didn't really enjoy the grass. And so then what happened was they gave me kitty morphine basically, and I kept giving her a little bit of kitty morphine each day to help ease her pain. And then what happened was on the night she basically passed away in my apartment with me. I kind of wish that I had done it differently, but what I did was I gave her a little kitty morphine. I don't know what it was actually called, but it was some kind of, painkiller for cats in a liquid, like an eyedropper that you can put in their mouth. And that's what I did because I didn't want to use any needles or anything. So I just gently put a few drops of this in her mouth. And on the night that she passed away, I gave her the rest of that I had of that, and she made horrible sounds, and she obviously she was passing away and she was dying, and she made strange sounds that she never made her whole life, like this weird, like she sounded like a wolf or like a wild animal, like a yowling. It was disturbing, and I don't know if she was suffering or when an animal is dying, they're just disoriented and they just kind of make weird sounds when they're leaving their body. And then it took a while, and then she didn't move anymore. And then I could tell she had passed away, but I made sure I cried and sat there with her for probably half an hour just to make sure that she had really passed away. And because I kept wanting to make sure she had passed away so that she was no longer suffering at all. And then my neighbors who loved her came over, and we all three of us, this man and this woman that were my neighbors who loved Stella and cared about her and helped take care of her a little bit when I was at work or something. They were really sweet and nice people. I forgot their names, but they were so nice. This was 2014. We all cried together and talked about Stella, and we sort of had a little funeral for Stella, talking about why we loved Stella and how cute Stella was and how may she rest in peace, and that we all loved her and cared about her. So I guess that was kind of like a funeral a little bit. And then I feel sad that her death was so long. I mean, the last 3 weeks of her life, she was not having any fun at all. And I feel sad that I probably shouldn't have drug it out that long. I don't know. So that's what happened with Stella. And then I buried her in my mom's yard with Tux and Bogey and Bacall and Aslan. Those are all other cats. My mom, mostly my mom's cats. Okay. So then Stella had passed away in 2014. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to try not to get another cat. And then within 3 months, I found Keesoon. Keesoon is an orange fluffy cat. He was an orange fluffy cat, and he was a beauty. And his name is Keesoon. I adopted him from a Russian lady, and she said that the name Keesoon is Russian for kitty. And I thought, well, that's a cool name. It is spelled. This is what I have now as a memento. Keesoon, Keesoon. And there's his paw print, which was hard to make because he had like fur between his toes and really fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. Here is his collar that actually he didn't really wear his collar towards the end of his life because he didn't really like it. So I didn't make him wear it. Keesoon Kringen, Keesoon Kringen. Okay. And here is a lock of his fur. I don't know if the camera can really focus. His fur is very orange, but it's not really focusing, but I'm not going to worry about it. And this is his toy that my dad got me, this turtle. A dog actually accidentally, a dog that I helped take care of chewed on it and kind of messed it up, but my cat didn't do that. But this says Bahamas on it, and it's my dad gave this to me as a gift. And Keesoon immediately liked it. I had a little toy for Keesoon, and this is like a big cat for a toy, a big toy for a cat. I said that wrong. Yeah. I accidentally discovered that Keesoon liked that. He had this little tiny toy that they gave me, his people gave me, and she gave him up for adoption because she was allergic to cats. And she found out the hard way that she was allergic to cats. So she very reluctantly gave him to me, and I adopted him. And he was 9. I think 9. Yeah, pretty sure 9. Okay. This was 2014 or 2015. Yeah. Stella died in the end of 2014. 2015, I adopted Keesoon, and I adopted him, and orange fluffy cat with big beautiful eyes, and he's just very handsome and very regal and very lion-like. And I adopted him, although I was kind of upset to see that she fed him. She gave me a bunch of his food. She gave me this food that is really cheap cat. I won't mention the name. Really cheap cat food that's full of wheat gluten, which is not good for pets. Wheat gluten is not good for pets. And pets seem to love the cheap cat food that is full of wheat gluten and cornstarch and potato starch and rice and wheat flour and rice flour and all this kind of carbs. Okay. So I weaned him off the cheap food with wheat gluten in it and started feeding him healthier food that didn't have, it had meat and not fake carbohydrate fillers and, fake cheap stuff. Okay. So I fed him. I went to the health food pet store and got the fancy kind of food that I thought was good for him in a can, and freeze dried meat kibble or whatever that doesn't have a lot of junk added to it. Because even at the fancy health food pet store, there's wheat gluten in some of that food. So you got to watch out. Even some of the fancy pet foods that are marketed as healthy, because they do have more protein in them, but they have some of the carbs in them also. And natural flavors, whatever that means. So basically what happened was I adopted Keesoon. Everything seemed fine. He seemed pretty healthy. And then I found out he was diabetic. And I'd never had a diabetic cat before. And this is a very long story. I don't think I'm going to elaborate. I even belonged to a support group for women who had cats that were diabetic. But these are women that knew how to give their cats insulin and check their blood sugar. And these women attacked me and ganged up on me. And I basically had to quit the group because they were so vicious and mean to me. So what happened was I got trained on how to give my cat insulin. He needed a tiny, tiny, tiny dose of insulin. And then you have to constantly check their blood sugar by pricking their ear. So to make a long story short, I tried to learn how to do this. He hated it. Some cats will tolerate it. So to make a long story short, what I did with my cat was I took him to a naturopathic vet. First, I took him to the mainstream vet. She's like, you got to give him insulin, got to give him insulin, got to give him insulin. And the food she recommended I feed him, I didn't like because it had carbs in it. And I thought a diabetic cat does not need carbs in their food. You just give more insulin. Carbs, insulin, more carbs, more insulin. It's like, no. Okay. So I took him to the naturopathic vet, and she agreed with me that feeding him a carnivore diet with no carbs with protein and fat would be the best thing. So raw meat diet. And he immediately loved it. He immediately loved the raw meat diet. So I added digestive enzymes. The vet told me add digestive enzymes to your cat's food. And I had a strategy. So for a few years, this worked. I tried for a few weeks. I got him insulin. I got the strips on how to test his blood sugar. You have to prick a cat's ears to check their blood sugar. And so I was trying to learn how to do it properly. But if you give them too much insulin, then they have hypoglycemia. They could have hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, and then have a seizure and die. And so then you have to give them carbs, and then you have to give them insulin, and then healthy food, and then carb food. And he's like, you constantly are chasing their blood sugar number to try to get it regulated. I didn't want Keesoon's life to be just about his blood sugar number because he hated it. Again, I've seen videos of cats where they inject them with insulin and test their blood sugar with a needle in their ear, and a little tiny vein in their ear. And I've seen cats that are calm about it. Like some cats will sit there and they're okay with it. Like they don't love it, but they're okay with it. They don't freak out. He freaked out. Like he would drool and cry. And yeah, and he was a very quiet cat. He didn't meow a lot. When I would take him to the vet, I only took him to the vet for 3 or 4 times because he was, and they said his blood pressure's through the roof. And they said, wow, he seems extra stressed at the vet. His blood sugar would go way up at the vet. His blood pressure would go way up at the vet. Just taking him to the vet was extremely traumatic for him. And I tried to calm him down in every way possible. And I didn't want to give him drugs, a sedative or whatever to calm him down. So what I did was I did everything I could to calm him down. And so I took him to the vet, and it was a really traumatic experience every time for him. And it upset me as well. Okay. So I went the route of, okay, I tried to do the insulin thing. It's not working. And then somebody said you can just give them insulin and not check their blood sugar. But then people say that's dangerous because if their blood sugar is too low or too high, it could be fatal. And you don't want to do that to an animal. So they don't recommend that you just give them insulin without knowing if their blood sugar, how high it is or not, because it could be normal. If you give a cat with normal blood sugar insulin, that's bad for them. Or if their blood sugar is too low and you give insulin, that's really bad. So if it has to be high to really give him insulin. So I didn't want to just randomly give him insulin and just guess and just hope that I'm right. And he wouldn't tolerate me checking his blood sugar and then giving him insulin. And then every day I was supposed to, every 12 hours, like check his blood sugar like twice a day and give him insulin twice a day, which again, if he had tolerated it and he was okay with it and he didn't freak out every time I did it, I would have tried to do it and see if we can get his blood sugar regulated. They say that it's easier to regulate a dog's blood sugar if a dog's diabetic. It's sad that diabetes and obesity is way up in cats and dogs. And I think it's because they put a lot of junk in their pet food, which is terrible. Okay. So I went the nutrition route and I used digestive enzymes in his food for a while. And I wish I'd kept up with that. Maybe that would have helped more. Eventually the diabetes caught up with him. He was pretty thin. And he started gaining weight when I switched him to powdered digestive enzymes mixed into his raw meat, frozen cat food. It was very labor intensive to get him expensive raw frozen meat made for cats. And then I would have to feed him because he would gulp his food really fast and throw up. So I had to feed him several small meals a day. So for the last few years, I've been feeding since I adopted him in 2015 and he just passed away in 2022. So for 7 years. So for the first 2 years, I didn't know he was diabetic. I don't know if he was or not, but eventually I found out he was diabetic. And so then I switched the diet. And so for the last 5 years, I have been feeding him several small meals a day, and to the point where I'll get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and I'll feed him whenever he wants food. I would give it to him. I give him a whole bunch of tiny meals, like probably 5 or 10 small meals a day. Because he couldn't just have a couple big meals a day because he would throw up. He would gulp it too fast because he was really hungry. Because when you're diabetic, it's hard to absorb. When you're a cat that's diabetic, it's hard for you to absorb the nutrients because of the way the insulin isn't working properly in your body, and you need help with that. So I did my best with nutrition, with really high quality nutrition. I would never give him any carbs because that would be really bad, make his blood sugar get even worse. So what I did was I did that. And eventually, just in the last I think in the last year, he started fading. But in the last few months, I just noticed he was getting skinnier and skinnier. He was still eating quite a bit, but he was skinny, and his poop seemed very healthy. His digestion seemed really healthy. Like when I first switched him to raw meat, his poop was amazing. It was like a nice brown, medium, like not to gross you out, but it was just very healthy, well formed, not too soft, not too hard, not very stinky. You know, like some cats like have this horrible diarrhea that's really putrid and gross, and they say that's not a healthy digestion going on there because of maybe what they're eating isn't so healthy. When you feed a cat really healthy food, they tend to have like poop that's kind of like medium brown, dark, medium to dark brown. Not too light, not too dark, just kind of in between, and like not too soft, not too hard, not too stinky. You know, it's stinky. It doesn't smell so good, but it's not that stinky. So his litter box, he just seemed like his pee and his poop were healthy, and um, for the last few years. And then he started getting skinnier and skinnier. And then I noticed that he sounded a little strange when he was breathing. He still looked happy, like he would go outside and run and play. He was just a little slower. Everything was a little slower, and he was skinnier. So obviously he was starting to get dehydrated. And then I noticed him walking a little funny on his hind legs, and that's neuropathy. So when a cat starts limping and they're diabetic, and they start walking kind of funny, almost like Charlie Chaplin, like his legs were like, instead of up on his regular feet in a normal way, he just sort of was down and walking a little like Charlie Chaplin. I mean, it looked really cute, but I could tell something was wrong. He still purred, he still played, he still peed and pooped and slept with me, and ate, and went out in the grass and played, and looked at birds and looked happy. And he would sit inside in his perch, and he did all the normal things that he loved to do. He had this really cute way of, my dad got me this from me, but keesoon, I discovered that this was his toy. When one time I left, I forgot something and it came back. And then I noticed he had this in his mouth, and he was going, rah, 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 making like funny sound, like, rah, look what I caught. Rah, rah, rah. And then I noticed he would do this sometimes when I was home. He would in the corner, kind of privately, he would pick this up and drag it around. And he just, this is a big thing for a cat to be dragging around. And he would drag it around and go, meow, 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 make this funny noise that he would never make except when he was picking up that toy. And I just thought, and I kept trying to film it. I tried to videotape it for years, and he would never, whenever I would try to film it, I try to sneak up on him and film it, he would stop. He'd be like, hey, this is my secret thing that I do. Don't film me. So I never got to film it. But it was so cute, and I'll never forget. I like have a little video in my head of him doing that, and a little audio video recording in my own mind. So that's my precious memory with keesoon. Is Stella would look at you all sassy and go, meow, I'm Stella, whereas keesoon would carry that toy, and he kind of had a kind of a nonchalant way of walking, and he would sit with his long legs crossed and sit like a sphinx and look very zen, Schwink-like, very beautiful, regal cat. And what did Tux do? Tux would follow me around, and Tux just seemed like I don't know. Tux was just a cutie. I don't know. I don't know what, his curly cute tail was the best thing, and he would just constantly be sitting on my chest. Tux was super affectionate, and Stella was very sassy and playful and spunky, and keesoon was very regal and very keesoon would come in the shower. I would be taking a shower, and he would come in there and kind of peek his head in, and I would open the shower curtain, and he would lean in, and he would want me to pet him, like scratch him on the chin and just pet him a few times. And then he would come in like 3 times and do that. It was funny. I don't know if that was his way of saying, hey, come on, get done with your shower and focus on me. I don't know, or if that was just a funny game that he played with me. I don't know what that was all about, but I love that. I love that he did that. My cat Bogey, years ago, I won't talk about Bogey much, but Bogey, I ended up giving to my mom, because I had to move, and then my mom adopted him, and then she fell in love with him. And so I gave Bogey to my mom permanently because my mom loved him so much, and I was going to take him back, but I let my mom keep him, and she kept him, and he had a nice long life. But he used to sit, when I would take a bath, he used to sit on the edge of the bathtub next to me, which was really funny. And Stella did that once. And actually, keesoon did that once too. Maybe Tux did too. Maybe all my cats do that. I don't know. I bond with my cats really, really deeply. And so they follow me around. And some cats don't bond with me as hard as I try, but the cats that I've really had a strong connection with, I bond with them and they follow, I'm a cat whisperer a little bit and they follow me around and it's really fun. And I just love all the personality quirks that every cat has. I just recently took care of a cat who lives in a house with a dog and they're friends. And the cat gets to be on a harness in the backyard and run around. And then the dog goes for walks in the neighborhood with me on a leash, but the cat and dog both play in the backyard together and it's really sweet. So this cat gets lots of outdoor time. And yet a coyote is not going to get her because she doesn't run around by herself. She is in the backyard supervised, but she gets to run around in the grass and play and look at birds all day. So, and she's a really sweet cat, super affectionate. So I was love taking care of her. But what happened was with Keesoon, he started fading and he was obviously getting more and more dehydrated and more skinny. Obviously he was emaciated and his body, and then he lost interest in eating, and I knew the diabetes was catching up with him, and I did not want to take him to the vet and have them do all kinds of things to him. And I knew they could inject him with fluids and hydrate him, but that would only be good for 48 hours. And I don't need to ramble on about the details, but let's just say that, and plus going to the vet was so stressful. The only thing I could have done was had a vet come to my house and try to give Keesoon emergency help to try to help him feel better, which would be to hydrate him. And I don't know what else they could have done. So a friend of mine, I labored over this. I thought I want to just do hospice care with Keesoon at home and let him die naturally. But the thing is, for the last 3 days of his life, he was so noble. So he had a strong will to live. Up until the end, up until the last day of his life, he still would ask to go outside. He stopped eating a couple days before we said goodbye to him, 2 or 3 days before. I tried to feed him with a little liquidy type food on my like carnivore diet food on my finger, and he wouldn't lick it. He would sniff it like he knew, yeah, that's food, but I don't want it. So I tried to make him eat and then he threw up. So I wasn't going to do that again. And then I actually tried to feed him some water, but to make a long story short, he couldn't even hold water down. He threw up water twice and he kept trying to drink and he kept going to his water bowl and he looked uncomfortable. Like there was something uncomfortable in his mouth. I think he had some mouth problem towards the end. He was very dehydrated, and up until the end, he was stumbling around because he was so dehydrated. I couldn't stand watching him so dehydrated and so hungry and thirsty. He still wanted to go out in the grass. The last fun thing he got to do was sit in the grass and look at birds. And he looked like he was not feeling very good, but he looked happy to be in the grass. He looked content. He was looking around at the birds and he still looked aware of the birds, even though he was kind of weak and dehydrated and starving. And he was stumbling, like he would walk kind of funny because he had neuropathy. And then I just remember seeing him walk up the steps the last time and he had a hard time with it, but he did it. Like he had the strength to do it. And he had, up until the end, he still wanted to try to drink water. He kept trying to drink water so hard. He kept trying so hard to drink water. And I can't even explain to you how the amount of strength he had to try to drink water because his body was just falling apart and he just tried so hard. And I felt like his spirit, his instinct to survive was really strong. And that's why I could have taken him to the vet. So what happened was a friend of mine offered to call around and find a vet tech person that could come to my house and verify that he really was at the point of saying goodbye. Or was there any hope? Could we take him to the vet and try to help him? So the vet tech person came and she was amazing. She was kind and compassionate. Her focus was on my cat, but she was also kind and compassionate to me because I was obviously feeling sad and like I wanted to do the best thing for Keesoon. So she verified with me that she felt his belly area and said that his intestines felt kind of stringy and hardened, and she didn't know what that meant. And unless you do an ultrasound, you wouldn't know, and he might not even survive. If you take him to the vet and have them do like a blood test and an ultrasound or whatever it is they could do to try to find out what's wrong with him and make sure we know everything that's going wrong with him, he might not even survive that, and he would be very stressed out. Based on his previous experiences at the vet, he would have been so stressed out. He drooled. He never would drool. But when I took him to the vet 3 times, he drooled in the car and went, wow, like he freaked out. For whatever reason, he couldn't handle being in the car. He hated going to the vet. So I did not want to put him through that when he's practically near death anyway, and he's dehydrated. So she verified to me, I think if you took him to the vet based on what you just said, he would hate it, and he might not even survive that. And they could offer to give him fluids and give him surgery and do whatever, all kinds of stuff they could do to him. They could look in his mouth and tell you, maybe he needs, dental work done or whatever. But if a cat can't eat or drink, what good is doing dental work? So the thing is, we decided, I decided I need to help him go, because what happened was he's probably going to pass away from dehydration and starvation eventually. I mean, definitely a cat cannot live without food and water. They can only live like that, just like a human, for so long. So we decided to, and so she did it the kind way. She talked me through it. We gave him a sedative. I'm sad to say this really made me cry hard. We gave him the sedative, and he knew that we had given him something strange. He immediately stood up and walked over to and he stumbled. He couldn't even hardly walk because he was so dehydrated. He tried to drink water once again. And so we pretended, it was my idea to pretend, because when my grandma was on her deathbed, she really loved horses, and she was on morphine, and my grandma was dying from a disease. And she said to my uncle, I need to give carrots to the horses. And my uncle played along, because obviously she's lying in her deathbed. She's not with horses, but we pretended my uncle was there. I wasn't there. My uncle said, okay, yes, we're going to give her carrot here. I just gave the horses some carrots just to calm her down. So we pretended we were going to help Keesoon drink some water. So we're like, here, Keesoon, here, get some water, because we'd already given the sedative. So we pretended like, okay, Keesoon, you're going to get some water. Come on, let's help you drink some water. Because we knew he couldn't, but we were just for his mental health, I was trying to help him drink some water. So, because he couldn't really drink it, and then he would throw it up anyway if he tried. That's what happened the last few times he drank water, is he threw it up. And it was so awful to see that his poor body could not even hold water down. And again, I knew if I took him to the vet and had them inject him with fluids, that's only good for 48 hours, and it would only give him a temporary relief, even though his body was still starving from the diabetes. So if I was a perfect cat mom, maybe I would have mastered the art of checking his blood sugar, giving him insulin, doing all the stuff I was supposed to do. But I didn't want to have his whole life be about needles and blood tests and, over medicalize his life. And so instead, he was home with me, and he got to spend a lot of time in the grass, and he got to eat really delicious, like raw meat. Like he got venison and rabbit and chicken and turkey and beef and pork and every kind of meat I could find for cats. I would feed him, and he loved it. For a while. For the first few years, he loved it. I think the last year of his life, he was starting to fade. The last 2 months of his life, he was really starting to fade. And I think he was uncomfortable for the last month, probably. I don't know, but he still liked time in the grass. Up until the last day of his life, he was still out in the grass. I had to partly carry him, and then he walked the rest of the way, and he sat in the grass, and he looked very regal, and he looked like he was still happy to be in the grass and sniff the air. He was very, always sniffing everything. So we compassionately said goodbye to him. She gave him the sedative, and he tried to drink some water, and then he sort of couldn't stand anymore, and he was just falling asleep. So then I picked him up, and I put him on my lap, and I petted him. And then she talked me through the next phase, and she said, okay, when you're ready, say goodbye, because he's now in a deep sleep, and his heart is still beating, and his brain is still working, and he's still with us. He's still Keesoon. He's still with us. And then she very gently, when I was ready, she let me talk with him and pet him and just get myself ready to say goodbye for real. Then she shaved his arm and gave him the anesthesia that you give him too much anesthesia, and then their heart stops after that. And he made one sound of like breath coming out of it. He kind of did this exhale, almost like a normal breath, but a little different. And then his body kind of moved a couple times, and she said that's the electrical activity. For all I know, that's when his soul left his body. I don't know, because I'm a very spiritual person. And so, because I think I think all my cats are more than just their cat bodies. And I think I'm more than just my body. So I have a soul. I think we all have souls. We're all animated with beyond just physical matter. That's what I think. And quantum physicists have even said this. You can't really prove that there's nothing spiritual. You can't really prove that all there is just physical matter, and that's it. And in fact, the more quantum physicists try to figure reality out, the more they're like, wow, we don't really understand how it all works. So you can't really prove, if you're an atheist, you can't really prove that that's true any more than a super religious person can prove what they're saying is true either. But there are amazing synchronicities in the world. And Lionsgate is the day we chose to say goodbye to my kitty Keesoon. This video is getting long, I know. August 8th, 2022 is when we said goodbye to Keesoon. And I found out later that that was National Cat Day or International Cat Day. I'm not sure which is amazing, and a good honorable day to say goodbye to a kitty that you love so much. And it's also Lionsgate, which is and Keesoon looked like a lion. I mean, he had this lion's mane, he had fluffy orange hair, beautiful like a lion mane, and these long legs, and he would sit there and all regal and sit there like a sphinx, a lion statue. And so Lionsgate, it's a portal to rebirth. Apparently that in astrological terms, that's a portal of rebirth. So I feel like I sent Keesoon on his portal of rebirth on Lionsgate Day. That's amazing. And so I felt like it was meant to be. I felt like I should give him a natural death. And then the vet tech said, well, some people romanticize natural death. It's really not, it's kind of cruel to do that unless the animal very gently falls asleep and never wakes up or whatever. But so what happened was we gently said goodbye to him and helped him on his transition in that way. And then the lady talked me through the rest of it, and she made this paw print clay Keesoon thing for me, and she clipped some of his hair and put it in this cute jar that I can keep his orange fur. I don't know why the camera won't really show you, but he had really beautiful orange fur. And I have a little kitty shrine with flowers over there. There's a little kitty shrine on that stool, and my friend gave me some flowers. And I have my cat in a freezer right now, wrapped up in a sanitary kind of way. And I keep saying goodbye to him every day, and I'm going to bury him soon in either my mom's yard or my friend's yard who offered. So I'm going to have a proper burial for him, and it's all done in a very respectful, loving way. I was going to say there was another cat, a friend of mine had a cat, and he let his kitty pass away naturally. And I feel like it was a very slow process, and I'm not sure if that was the best thing to do for the kitty. So I've witnessed a cat dying completely naturally, and it was very slow, and I feel sad for the cat, and I'm not sure if that was the best thing or not, but my friend felt like that was the best thing for her, to let her have a natural death, and to instead of thinking death is wrong and bad and unnatural, was accepting of the reality of her death. She was very old. She was probably about 20. She was very old and just fading. And then I had, a cat get euthanized in the gentle way. And then I had another cat euthanized in the mean way. I've had other cats die because they get hit by a car, and that was awful. And then the fourth method is my kitty that I had kitty morphine for. And she sort of had a partly natural death and a partly sped up with morphine for kitties kind of a death. And so all four of those methods were kind of sad and uncomfortable. No matter how you say goodbye to a pet, it's going to be uncomfortable for the human and for the pet, probably. I have to say that Keesoon's passing away was probably the most peaceful, gentle thing for both the animal and for me. And I'm so grateful for the lady that came to my house and did this in such a kind, compassionate, respectful, ethical way, and the friend of a friend of mine. So I had all this, and then this other really close friend of mine, the guy that I'm dating, basically, my good friend who I'm dating, he was there. So I had the vet tech person, a friend of mine who's very spiritual and kind and gives really nice hugs, and then my boyfriend who gives nice hugs, and me. So all of us were there with Keesoon to help support him in his transition. And so I felt like that was a very respectful way to say goodbye to a cat and help them pass away. And I cried a lot for the first couple of days, and now I feel more calm about it. I am so relieved that I'm no longer worried that he is dehydrated, that he needs food and water, and he needs help. And I'm so glad that his spirit is no longer in a body that has failed to allow him to run in the grass and enjoy his life. And Oh my gosh, I miss him so much. I took all the cat perches out of my living room. He used to sit right over there by the window and look out the window at the birds and have the fresh air blowing in the window. And I miss seeing the wind blow through his fur and his cute walk and his cute. I still remember the way Tux walked and the way Stella walked, the way Bogey walked, and the way Keesoon walked. Those are my 4 most recent cats. Bogey, Tux, Stella, and Keesoon. And I love all the cat. I've loved all the cats, and now I'm walking somebody's dogs, and I just took care of a dog and a cat, and I might pet sit for somebody else that has 2 cats in the fall, I think. And I'm happy that I can take care of other people's pets, and I feel like I want to try to retire from adopting pets. I've had pets my whole life. I think I want to try to take a break from it and just love other people's cats and dogs and other pets of any kind. I love goats, and I would love to take care of a guinea pig or a snake or any kind of pet, really, a rat, a mouse, any kind of pet. I had a friend when I was 11 who had pet rats, and they were really nice and sweet creatures. Yeah, thanks for listening. This is Shannon Kringen, Goddess Kring, just talking about grief and loss of a pet. Hope this helped somebody. It made me feel better to share. Hope it made sense. Hope everything I said made sense. And I continue along this journey of grieving. And now I can visit my dad in Florida and won't worry about my cat, because my cat is resting in peace, and he's free, and his soul is free, spirit is free. So thanks for listening. And it is now, what is it? Yeah, it's August 12th, 2022. Okay, bye for now. Bye. My website, shannonkringen.com. Yeah, I like to share. Thank you. And I'm in an art car event. I'm in a bunch of art car events. I have rhinestones all over my art car, but that's a whole different topic. But just search Shannon Kringen, Goddess Kring art car, and you'll find a opal moonstone, my art car. That's another thing I'll miss is I worked outside in the yard putting rhinestones on my car, and my cat would be sitting in the grass, and I would be waving at him while I was putting rhinestones on my car. And I just will miss seeing him in the grass. He got a lot of time sitting in the grass, and he looked really happy sitting in the grass. I'm glad I got to give that to him. And okay, bye for now.